you ask Florida fans, if Florida fires Billy Napier, who do you want to replace him? You ask them, tell me who you want. It's like asking a 5-year-old or something what they want to be when they grow up. I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a fireman. I want to be a cowboy. It's just this. You get this crazy list of names that you just, as soon as you hear them, you're like, these people are never coming. These people are never coming to Florida. But anyway, I've got a list of names written down here that I've heard Florida fans over the last couple of days talking about on Twitter and other places about, like, coaches that they would be willing to accept in Gainesville. This is another funny thing, too. I think they think that the Florida head coaching job right now is more than what it actually is. They're like they have a list of coaches that they're like, no, he's not good enough for Gainesville, whatever things. Anyway, this is a list of names. Now, yes, some of this is ridiculous because look, we're all fans. You kind of get it, but so just take it for what it is. But this is what some names I've heard fans. I've heard fans talking about here, and some of them are, it's like, well, what do you want for Christmas, little Johnny? I want to end the world hunger, and, I want world peace and an end to childhood hunger and stuff. Yeah, okay. Dan Lanning as the Florida head coach. Dan Lanning is a popular one that I've heard. Why in the world anybody would leave Oregon and take the Florida job, I don't know. But Dan Lanning seems to love it up there. He's got Oregon on a roll. Made the playoffs last year in the Big Ten title game. They were the only team to go 12-0 last year. They're off to a good start this year. They've got what appears to be a never-ending stream of money there at Oregon. And in today's college football, that seems to matter. Florida fans, I hear complaining about their NIL stuff all the time. Florida's NIL situation started off as a complete and total mess and a disaster. I think it's a little bit better now, but this isn't even an insult to Florida, but like Florida's NIL program, it doesn't compare to Oregon's, but almost nobody's does. That's not even an insult to Florida, but I don't know why Dan Lanning would even think twice about leaving Oregon to take the job at Florida. And then I heard the Florida man say, well, Cristobal was at Oregon and he left there to come to Miami. Well, Cristobal had Miami connections. He's a Miami guy. Lanning doesn't necessarily have that. Now he is an SEC guy. He spent a lot of time at Bama, and then, of course, a lot of time as defensive coordinator at Georgia under Kirby Smart. But I don't know. It's not that I think that would be a bad hire. I think it would be a good hire. If you're looking to go for a defensive-minded guy, I think that would be a pretty good hire. Now, generally, this has just been my experience with Florida fans going back 20 or 30 years, even before the age of social media, just talking to Florida, actual Florida fans, even in real life back in the day or whatever. Most Florida fans, not all, most Florida fans that I know and have come across and talk with tend to want or prefer an offensive-minded head coach. And I think a lot of this goes originally back to Steve Spurrier, who, of course, sort of changed college football offensively with some of the things he was doing with the fun and gun and all that back in the 90s. And then their other sort of most successful run in program history came under Urban Meyer in the late 2000s, another offensive guy who won a couple of natties there, right, the Tim Tebow years. So I get it. You've watched your program go through two really good runs with two really good head coaches, both of which were offensive minded. So a lot of times when you hear Florida fans talk, they'll just straight up tell you they prefer an offensive head coach. Now, Billy Napier's an offensive head coach. And we sort of see where that's gotten you. That's a whole other set of issues there with him being his own play caller. He did hire an offensive coordinator, but he still calls his own plays. We don't need to get into that. But Dan Lanning, look, I think Dan Lanning would be a great hire for anybody that hired him. I think Dan Lanning's a really good head coach. I think he's proven that in a couple of years at Oregon. He hasn't necessarily won, the big game. He lost to DeBoer in the Pac-12 championship, well, in the regular season too, but in terms of like big games, he lost to DeBoer in the Pac-12 championship in the last year of the Pac-12. He did win the Big Ten championship last year, beating Penn State, but then lost in the first round of the playoffs. But he's still a young head coach. He's only been there, 3 years or whatever, and he's only been a head coach for 3 years. It's his first head coaching job, and it's hard to argue with what he's done there so far. But so I think it would be a good hire. It's not like I think Florida fans are stupid for wanting him. I just would be surprised if Lanning would even consider that, honestly. But that is a name. That is a name you hear. What are some other names that I hear Florida fans? That's either completely ridiculous, or I think it would be terrible, or whatever. John Gruden. Please hire John Gruden. Please. What has this guy ever done in college football? This is it's Bill Belichick to a lesser degree. It's Herm Edwards at Arizona State. I don't get it. Is he an entertaining social media personality these days? Yeah. But so am I. You don't want, and trust me, you don't want me as your head coach. Okay. I'm not comparing myself to John Gruden. I just mean he's obviously had success as a head coach, at the college level. But Tennessee fans went through this infatuation with John Gruden. Was it when they hired Pruitt? Anyway, you remember they were on social media tracking private planes from Tampa, and there was the whole hashtag Gruden to the Hill and groomers. You remember that? Groomers is GRUMORS. I get you can't really say the word groomers these days. It takes on a different meaning. That would be Dabo Swinney's brother. John Gruden, I think, would be a disaster hire, an absolute disaster. John Gruden hire to me is like a Dion hire. You're doing it for attention, not because you think it's going to lead to a lot of wins. You know, hiring John Gruden is akin to Colorado hiring Dion. In other words, I think Colorado hiring Dion is a pretty good idea. Colorado's like a nothing program that nobody talks about. A lot of people forgot it even existed. So, okay, fine. You go out and get Dion. At least now you're getting some press clippings. As bad as Florida has been, they're not that. Like, they're people know Florida exists. And with the right coach there, they can win at an extremely high level. I don't think that's the case at Colorado. But anyway, so please hire John Gruden. I think that would be an absolute disaster for you as a football team. So I would be completely on board with you doing that, because I think it would be a complete mess. What other names have I heard that I think are just completely ridiculous? Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer is not leaving the Fox broadcast booth to come back to the SEC. I'm sorry, it's not happening. He's not coming back to Florida. This isn't a Rich Rod situation. You know, Rich Rod coached at West Virginia 20 years ago, had some success, left. Now he's back, and he's sort of the savior, the white knight riding in to save the day type of deal. That's not happening with Urban Meyer. I would be absolutely shocked. Do I think it would be a good hire from a football point of view? Yeah, he's proven time and time again everywhere he's been that he can win a ton of games at a high level. So from a football perspective, I think it would be absolutely genius. I don't think it's happening. I would be absolutely shocked if Urban Meyer even took a phone call at this point from the University of Florida. Who else have I seen on here that I think is just completely ridiculous? That's really it. The rest of these names, okay, let's just start at the top. Sumrall from Tulane. Now, I am surprised he's still there. I thought somebody was going to take him a few years ago, every offseason for the last couple of years. As soon as the season starts to wind down in November, I start looking around at job openings and going, okay, which one of these schools is going to take Sumrall? And so far, he's stayed at Tulane. Now, I don't think that's going to happen for very long. He is a high-level coach, I think, and has Tulane winning a lot of games. Would the Florida fans accept that, though? I have heard some Florida fans on social media saying they do not want another Group of Five coach. They brought McElwain in from the Group of Five, didn't really work. They've brought Napier, of course, in from the Group of Five. That didn't really work. They seem to want an established Power 4 level guy. So I don't know. Maybe I'll ask the Florida fans that might be watching, what would you think about Sumrall? I think he's a good coach at Tulane. I don't know. I'd probably have to think about it some more in terms of, is it a good fit at Florida? How would he do there? I don't think it's a bad hire. I think somebody is very close. Some Power 4 school, I believe, is very close to taking a shot on Summerall. And it may end up working out. It may not, that's always the case. But that wouldn't be a terrible hire, I don't think. I think that has a chance to be a success. What about Lebby at Mississippi State? I've heard his name mentioned a few times now. He had a disastrous first year at Mississippi State. It was absolutely terrible. They didn't win a single SEC game. But already early in his second year, now remind you, Billy Napier's in his fourth year, losing to teams like South Florida at home, while Lebby at Mississippi State is busy beating the defending Big 12 champion and previously top 15 ranked Arizona State. A huge win for the Mississippi State football program. He's an offensive guy, longtime offensive coordinator at several different places, high-level offense. And he loves to sling the ball around, which would be a huge throwback sort of to the Spurrier days. What do you think about that one? Lebby, he is a good offensive mind. Do Florida fans really want to go to the Mississippi State route again? You know, they did that with Dan Mullen and they ran him off. But to be fair, Dan Mullen's the best coach they've had since Urban Meyer. I mean, he's the best coach you've had since Urban Meyer. Again, this is something you do a whole other video on, but you ran Dan Mullen off too soon. Was he a clown? Yeah, hell, I clowned him. Some of the comments and stuff he made were completely ridiculous, but the guy got to the SEC championship game in 2020. I mean, he's the best year since Urban Meyer left. Is he a great coach, Dan Mullen? No, but he's better than anybody else you've had, including Napier, since Dan Mullen. But anyway, what do you think about Lebby? Alex Golesh, of course, at South Florida. This is another one that, like Summerall at Tulane, this is a matter of time before somebody grabs up Alex Golesh at South Florida. What he's done there in a short period of time is nothing short of miraculous. I mean, they beat Boise State. Not only did they beat them in week one, I mean, they blew them out 34-7. And they follow that up by going on the road to Gainesville and beating a Florida team that some of y'all got tricked into thinking was pretty good. Now, I don't think that. And I actually think South Florida's about to get blown out on the road at Miami. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and South Florida will be a top 5 team next week. And I do think South Florida potentially is the best group of 5 team this year and may end up making the playoffs, even if they get beat by Miami or blown out by Miami. But what did you think about that? Alex Golesh, he's been a SEC offensive coordinator. He's now the head coach at South Florida, so, knows his way around the state in terms of recruiting and the high school scene down there and things like that. What would you think about that? Golesh, hard to knock that. If that were the hire, it'd be hard to knock it, considering what he's done at South Florida in a short period of time. Lane Kiffin. I'm on record going back to when you hired Napier saying, I think the best coach for Florida right now in college football is Lane Kiffin. I would be extremely worried as a Georgia fan, and I think the rest of the SEC should be extremely worried if Florida were somehow able to lure Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. I think he has turned into a really good head coach. And that's not a thing where I can sit here and say, I told you so. I thought Lane Kiffin was going to be a failure as a head coach in the SEC anywhere, especially at Ole Miss. He's proved me wrong. He has had 2 or 3 seasons at Ole Miss better than any season Florida has had in a while. Nearly made the playoffs last year at 9-3, missing out by 1 game. Now, Florida did beat him last year. That's kind of what kept them out of the playoffs. But I think Lane Kiffin would be a home run hire at Florida. You look at how well Lane Kiffin has used the portal at Ole Miss. It's hard to find a coach anywhere else in the country that has the success rate through the portal that Lane Kiffin has. If you were to combine his sort of being a guru in the portal with the potential year in and year out high school recruiting rankings he could have year over year at Florida, plus the offensive mind that he has and his ability to work with QBs, I think he would almost overnight turn Florida into a contender. If Lane Kiffin was your coach right now, you definitely don't lose to South Florida. You probably win 8, 9, maybe even 10 games this year if you have Lane Kiffin right now. Never mind how, the ways he could rework that roster through portal and recruiting. I think more than any name in college football right now, Lane Kiffin would be the absolute best hire Florida could make. And it's the one hire I absolutely hope they don't make. I hope they're not able to lure Lane Kiffin away from Ole Miss. I hope he looks at Florida and what's been going on there and the pressure there compared to the relative low pressure at Ole Miss, and decides to just stay there. In the age of the 12-team playoff, look, Florida's a better job than Ole Miss. There's no doubt about it. You're going to make more money, most likely. It's easier to recruit. The facilities are better. Just everything almost is better about the Florida job than Ole Miss in general. That is true. But in the age of the 12-team playoff, about to expand to more probably, you're just as likely right now to get into the playoffs if you know what you're doing as a head coach and the portal and all that, like Lane Kiffin does at Ole Miss, than you are at Florida. So do you really want to sort of take that leap and put yourself under that added pressure? I don't know. Maybe he does, but I think that would be a home run hire for Florida more than any other name on this list. Jed Fish I've seen mentioned. I doubt it. I have a feeling they're going to go after some a Southeastern guy. Whether that means SEC or not, I don't know, but somebody in this region of the country. That's just the feeling I get, but that name has been mentioned. Brom at Louisville. I think Brom's a great coach. I think he showed that at Purdue, and he's really proven it at Louisville. They didn't look great last week against James Madison, but like South Florida, James Madison is one of a handful of Group of Five teams that has the potential to be that team that makes the playoffs. And although Louisville didn't play great, they at least won the game, which is something Sunbelt Billy was unable to do against South Florida this past week. But this is another guy that's an absolute offensive genius and can get the most out of quarterbacks. He also works the portal really well. Again, if you can get a coach that has proven that he can sort of find the diamond in the rough in the portal and put him at Florida, which is a school that almost recruits itself. If you can combine the high school recruiting and the high hit rate in the portal, that's what would elevate you to elite status almost immediately. But I don't think Brom would leave Louisville. He's a Louisville guy. He's from there and all that. I find it hard to believe he would leave Louisville, but maybe worth making a phone call. Don't know. Fran Brown at Syracuse. If you want to go the defensive route, Dan Lanning, Fran Brown, maybe Georgia's defensive coordinator now. If you want to go the defensive route, though, Fran Brown had a good year at Syracuse his first year. It's only 1 year, though, and it's not off to a great start for him in year two. They, of course, got blown out by Tennessee back in week one and really struggled last week against UConn, had to win in overtime 27-20. But he had a good year his first year, got to 10 wins there. He's a defensive guy. Again, most Florida fans I know tend to prefer an offensive mind or whatever. But Bobby Petrino, this is sort of an Urban Meyer. He's got some baggage. He's got some stuff that comes along with him. Some of the past things that have happened with him there. But he's sort of slowly worked his way back into the upper echelons of SEC football. He spent a year as the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher before they fired him and moved on. He's now back at Arkansas as the offensive coordinator there, up under Sam Pittman. And Arkansas is liable to be looking for a coach at the end of this season, too. A lot of people think Sam Pittman might be on his last leg there. So it could be that Petrino is sort of slated to be the guy that takes over for Sam Pittman at the end of the year if Arkansas decides to part ways with him. But maybe Florida looks in that direction, Bobby Petrino. And then Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Now, this is another one that's not an SEC footprint guy. He's from the Midwest. I don't think Matt Campbell is interested in a high-level job. Several years ago, a couple of years after he became the head coach at Iowa State and pretty much turned him around immediately, his name started being mentioned every year, every time any high-level job would come open anywhere. And he kept turning them down time after time after time. There are some coaches that are happy to be at a place like Iowa State, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. What I mean is, they're happy to be a really good coach at a place where winning 9 games a year is fine if you do it every year for the next 100 years. That wouldn't be the case at Florida. The pressure mounts there. 9-3 and missing the playoffs is great the first couple of years you're there if you're taking over for a bad program, but eventually they're going to want those 9 wins to become 10. And those 10 wins to become playoff bursts, and those playoff bursts become playoff wins. The pressure is more. And I'm under the impression from sort of just the way Matt Campbell has answered some coaching questions in the past that he's maybe more happy staying where he's at than he is taking a leap to a potentially better spot, but one that's going to come with a lot more pressure and expectation. So I don't know first of all, I don't know if Florida would even consider Matt Campbell, or if the fans would accept that. And number two, I'm not convinced Matt Campbell's even looking for anything else outside of Iowa State. But those are some of the names. Lance Leopold is another one I heard. I think Florida is going to get somebody with Southeastern ties and connections, whether that means it's somebody that's in the SEC right now or at least doing something in the SEC footprint right now, or has history there. It's because Dan Lanning's obviously not in the SEC right now. He's furthest from the SEC you can get, Northwest Oregon. But he's got a ton of SEC ties and connections. He sort of came up through the coaching ranks down here in the southeastern United States, so that's separate. But so Lance Leopold at Kansas, I think he's a great coach. But is that a route Florida would want to go? Probably not. It feels like they want, and again, nothing against Leopold. I think he's a good coach. It seems like they want a more splashy sort of name than that. Anyway, don't even know if Napier's going to get fired. Obviously, they sort of went through this last year after week 2 when they got blown out by Miami, and then Napier was able to save his skin by winning a couple of meaningless games in November that amounted to nothing. And I'm also not convinced that Florida has the $20 million or is willing to part with the $20 million it would take to fire Napier. I mean, that's a lot of money. If you look at last year, only 3 Power 4 head coaches were fired, and the highest buyout paid last year was by North Carolina to Mac Brown, $9.5 million. And I know Texas A&M paid $70 million, and we've seen schools pay $30, $40, $50 million like it was nothing in the past. But now that we've got rev share and the schools are required to pay the athletes $20, $21 million a year, you're starting to see these schools become less and less likely to pay these huge buyouts. So if the wheels fall off for Florida, if they don't make a bowl game, if they only win 6 games or something like that, I think Florida will do whatever they have to do to come up with the $19, $20, $21 million, whatever it is, to buy out Billy Napier. I think they've had enough and seen enough down there, and the fans are just revolting. I mean, they're chanting, "Fire Billy Napier" in the stadium as they're leaving there after that game-winning field goal by South Florida. I mean, the fans have had enough and seen enough, and I get the feeling that Florida, if they decide they want to make a change, the $20 million buyout won't be what prevents them from doing it. I have a feeling they'll find a way to come up with the money. But anyway, what names did I leave out? What name do you think might end up at Florida? Is there a name that you're like, oh God, I hope they don't get that guy, because that would be a home run? For me, it's Lane Kiffin. I hope Florida doesn't get Lane Kiffin. I think that would be a problem for everybody else if Florida were to land Lane Kiffin. But what's that name for you? If you're not a Florida fan, who's the one coach you look at and you go, oh boy, I hope they don't get that guy? Or what names are you hearing? Let me know down below, and we'll talk to you later.